Alright, so welcome to this lesson where we're going to take a look at Oridomi.js. Now, Oridomi allows you to fold up div elements like paper, and it can create some really cool and interesting effects, and also it can be used to help display menus and other div elements, and it can be very cool and effective. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is open up the file that I've downloaded from Oridomi.com. And right here you'll be able to see we have the Oridomi.js file. So this is the library that we want to create those effects. And this library has no dependencies. Now you can use it with jQuery if you want. But however, if jQuery doesn't exist, don't worry about it. You don't have to load that into your page. And we are actually going to be coding this as if we have no library dependencies apart from Oridomi.js. Now the index.html file is actually the index.html file on the web server Oridomi.com. And you can take a look at all the really cool effects. You'll be able to see I'm loading this from the hard drive, but if you go to Oridomi.com, you'll get exactly the same page. And right here you have some really cool folding effects. You have the stair effect right there, accordion, and so forth, that can give you some really cool and interesting and engaging effects. So you can fold it up and you can fold it out and so forth and so on. And then you have a little bit of documentation down here as well. So if we go back, right here what we have is the docs folder. I've just included an ODT file. You can read that with OpenOffice, LibreOffice, or newer versions of Microsoft Office. And basically you can just take a look at what I've written right there, but basically it's the step-by-step process in order to get this to actually work properly. But as I said, I'll be going over this with you when we actually start coding in the demo.html file. Then we have the demo file right here. We have some CSS, we have the demo.js, and also we have some images right here. This is obviously for the index.html file. So if you want to make sure that stays working, you need to keep that demo folder with it and all of its assets as well. But we're going to be starting from scratch. We're going to be opening up the demo.html file inside of Dreamweaver. And what we have right here is, first of all, I have some style tags right here, so all my CSS is going to go inside of there. Then also I have linked to the Oridomi.js file, and this is the minified version, by the way. Then also what I've done is I've used encapsulation. So what that basically means is that when you encapsulate something, you keep it out of the actual global namespace, and that way things can actually execute quicker in JavaScript. But it's not a big deal. I'm just going to encapsulate my code right there. I have a function called init, standing for initialize. So when I initialize something, it means I'm about to start something. And down here, what we're doing is we're waiting for the DOM contents to be loaded. That's very important. We want to make sure that all the content of the DOM is visible, so all the div elements, all the styles and everything else is visible. And then we want to call the init function, which is initializing, and then we can start to apply all the Oridomi effects. That will help with, obviously, avoiding bugs where it's trying to look for DOM elements that haven't loaded yet or haven't got all their styles yet, and then trying to fold that up and so forth. It's just going to make a giant mess. So this way, when we use encapsulation and we wait for all the DOM content to be loaded, this way it's nice and safe and we can execute those functions without getting any bugs or errors. So once I've done that, that's obviously the first step. What I'm going to go ahead and do is create a div element. And I'm just going to give this an ID of accord, because we're going to apply the accordion effect first. And then inside of there, I'm going to put some text in here, just saying something like hello world. Perfect. So once I've gone ahead and done that, let's go ahead and style this now. So I'm just going to point to that div element with my CSS selector. I'm just going to give this a width and a height, and it's always recommended to give your elements a width and a height before Oridomi loads, and obviously define that rather than letting the browser define that. That way it can sort of quite easily find the width and the height, the mass, and then it can divide it up into sections. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is say width 200 pixels, the height is going to be 200 pixels. Then I'm going to put a background color of blue onto here, like so. The text color can be white. I'm going to align the text in the center and increase the font size. So I'm going to say font size 2EM. Alright, so we'll take a look at that and see how it looks. So we'll scoot off to Safari. We have our demo.html file right here. Hit refresh and there we go. Hello world. Perfect. So now what I want to do is actually start to fold this up. So what I'm actually going to do is increase the width, and I'm just going to decrease the height right there. Cool. So then we're just going to get a nicer effect. So what I can go ahead and do now is create a variable, and don't forget that I'm writing this inside of the init function. I don't want anything to run until all that content in the DOM has been loaded. And I'm going to say var, and this variable is going to point to that element. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say accord. So that's the name of the variable. Then I'm going to say document.getElementById. So I'm looking at the DOM and I'm saying get an element with the ID of accord. So now we're pointing to this div element. Then I'm going to close my brackets and end with a semicolon. That's the first step. The next step is we need to actually define some options for our accordion right here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a new variable. What we're going to do is call this accord options. Then what we want to do is initialize Oridomi. So I'm going to say new Oridomi. Have a capital D and a capital O right here. And that's very important because this is case sensitive. Once I've done that, I want to open and close my brackets and end with a semicolon. Now, the first parameter we need to pass in is effectively which DOM element we want to target and obviously apply the Oridomi effects to. So as you know, this variable right here is effectively pointing to this div element. So all I have to do is pass in this variable as the first parameter, and that will tell Oridomi which DOM element we want to target. I've done that, I'm going to put in a comma, and I need to define my second parameter. Now my second parameter allows me to define my options, and we need to define our options inside of an object. So we're just going to use an object literal, which is opening and closing your parentheses right here. And then inside of there, what I want to go ahead and do is start to define some of the options and change some of the values. So first of all, we have vPanels. So this allows us to chop up our object vertically, and we can set a number right here. I'm just going to set this to 4. Then we have hPanels, and this allows us to chop up our object horizontally, and I'm going to set that to 4 as well. Then we have a few more options that we can define and change. So we have, for example, perspective. Obviously, the greater the perspective, the less noticeable the actual 3D transition is, or the more subtle it is. But also, if you obviously lower that number down on the perspective, the greater the effect is of the transformation. So what I'm just going to do is go ahead and set this to 500, so it's fairly subtle. We have the shading option, which is quite good for, let's say, browsers and devices that really can't handle that much power and they can't sort of render this nice and quickly. So what we can do is actually turn off shading by setting it to false, but I'm going to leave it on right here and set this to true. And what I'm going to go ahead and do then is put in another option down here. One is going to be touch enabled. Now obviously Oridomi takes care of the fact that, you know, this could be on a touch enabled device or it could be on a desktop device where we use the mouse. It doesn't really matter, but the touch enabled option actually allows us to stop a dragging effect, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I'm going to set that to true, and that's by default. So once I've gone ahead and done that, now what we need to do is tell Oridomi to apply an effect to this DOM element. So I'm just going to grab this variable's name right here, accord options, and then what we can do is start to take a look at the methods that are available to us. So we have accordion, and as you can see right here, you can take a look at all the different options. So this is an accordion that's folding up vertically, and this is an accordion that's folding up horizontally, and so forth. And you have your methods right here. So reveal, you have stairs, you also have accordion, which is the one that we're going to apply now, and so forth and so on. And at the bottom of the page you have a little bit more of a description on what parameters you need to pass in, or extra options that you can set. So now that I've taken a look at that, what I can do is say accord options dot, and then I'm going to apply the accordion effect to this DOM element. Alright, so I'm going to say accordion, open and close the brackets, and end with a semicolon. Now, the first parameter that we're going to define is basically how much we want to fold this up effectively. So we can set this as a positive number or a negative number, and that will affect the way that it will actually look in the browser. So I'm just going to set this to negative 40. Now, this isn't negative 40 pixels, this is 40%. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just basically go into the browser, take a look at my demo.html file, and now you'll be able to see it's folded up 40%. So when we're all the way over here, you'll notice that this is 100%, and also I'm actually able to drag this. So let's go back, and I'm going to set this to 100. And when we set this to 100, it's not 100 pixels, it's 100%, so it's completely folded up right there. So that's pretty cool, and as you can see, this is very, very nice and easy to actually control and edit. So I'm just going to change that back to 40. Alright, so to stop that dragging effect, even though it's touch enabled, which you'd think that was for an actual iOS device or any other type of touch enabled device, it also will stop desktop browsers as well from interacting dragging. So what I can go ahead and do is go back, hit refresh, and there what you'll see is the fact that I can no longer drag this, and I can still select this text and so forth, which is really nice. So I'm going to set it back to true. Now if I set this to a positive number, you'll see that it folds inwardly. So hit refresh, and now you'll be able to see it's folding in, just like so. Alright, so we have some really, really cool and interesting effects that are available to us. And as you can see, dragging sometimes does have a very buggy effect, which I don't actually really want. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is say touch enabled false. I'm going to set this to 0. So basically it's just going to go flat. And I can't drag this so it doesn't look 3D. But what I want to do is when I hover over this object, I actually want it to then fold up. So I'm just going to grab this variable right here, which is pointing to this DOM element, and when we hover over that DOM element, I want to trigger a function that's going to fold up that div element. So I'm going to say accord, which is pointing to the DOM element, and I'm going to say add event listener. Then we need to say what do we want to listen out for. Well, we want to wait until the user hovers over, which is mouse over, and then we want to run a function, open and close your brackets and parentheses, and then I'm just going to say if not, then return false. Alright, so once we've gone ahead and done that, the next thing that we want to take a look at is actually folding this up. So when they hover over this DOM element right here, and then once that happens, we're going to run this function, and we're going to paste that in, and we're going to fold this up some. So we're just going to say 100. Alright, so I'm just going to save that now and go back, hit refresh, and when I hover over it, you'll notice it folds up. And then of course, if you want to do the reverse, then you say mouse out, and we'll set that to 0 again. So hit refresh, hover over it, hover off it. Super cool. And you'll see there is a little bit of a bouncing effect right there. So this is slightly buggy, so try to use this effect very, very sparingly. You don't want to use it on every single element in your page, because you will end up, with lots of choppy stuff, and it can end up crashing the browser or just looking like a big mess. So we definitely do not want that. So what we can do right now is actually set the speed of this animation by going to our options right here. And I'm just going to put in a brand new option right here that says speed. So once I've gone ahead and done that, I can define the speed in milliseconds. So if I said 500, it would be half a second. I'm just going to set this to 2 seconds, so 2000 milliseconds. And let's go ahead and take a look at this in Safari. So when I refresh, you'll notice that it's sort of more slow to respond. And I can make that even slower to make it more apparent, just like so. Now you can see it's going really slow. And then you can also make it very quick as well. And sometimes that can be beneficial to make it quicker, and other times it's not beneficial to make it quicker. So it's entirely up to you, but I'm just going to leave it as 1 second. That's looking pretty good. Alright, so now I've gone ahead and done that. Also what we can do is use the reset method. So instead of saying accordion 0, which is effectively setting it to its original state, we can just say reset. And I can save that, go back, hit refresh, and there we go. As you can see, when I leave off this, when my mouse moves off the DOM element, it resets back to the normal position. Now you do have a few more parameters that you can pass in to the accordion method. So what I can go ahead and do is put in a comma right here so I can pass in a second parameter. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, in the quotation marks, I'm just going to set a value. Now you can set this as left or right, top or bottom, or you could just have the first character, so L for left, R for right, T for top, and B for bottom. However, you can also set a number, so it's 1 for left, 2 for right, 3 for top, and 4 for bottom. Obviously I don't like that, setting the number right there, because you can't really tell if you come back to it later on and you forget all about how Oridomi's methods actually work. You won't be able to say, okay, that's the left side, right side. So what I like to do is just put in the first letter right there. So in this instance we have left, that's by default. Let's go ahead and change that now to right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh, and now you'll be able to see it's folding upwards to the right. Now also notice that we set the horizontal panels right here, and this is for folding up vertically. So if I was to say top, it would fold up towards the top panel like so, and then I can say B for bottom, just like so. Alright, so once I've gone ahead and set those options right there, so we've just discovered and obviously played around with the accordion method right here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the reveal method. So once I've commented all of this out, and I'm just going to copy this right here and paste this below. And what we'll do is just collapse that code right there. So instead of saying accordion, I'm going to say reveal. Now what is reveal? Well, reveal is exactly the same as the accordion where it folds up. However, it keeps the anchored panel flat to the surface of the page. So for example, the bottom panel in this case will stay flat to the page. And again, we need to change all of these methods right here. And go back and hit refresh. And I'm just going to hover over. You'll notice that the bottom panel, which is the anchored panel, is staying flat to the page. I can make the anchored panel the top panel, right and left as well. So I'll just do right here. Hit refresh, and there we go. So as you can see, that anchored panel stays flat to the page. Alright, so the next thing that I want to actually do is take a look at the curl method. So again, it's exactly the same. You have, again, your method, so whether that be accordion, you have reveal, curl, and so on and so forth. You have, first of all, the value that you want to actually fold it up by, and in this case I'm setting it to 0, so it's not folded at all. And then I'm setting the anchored panel. And don't forget that if you want to animate vertically, you need to put in your horizontal panels. And if you want to animate horizontally, you need to put in your vertical panels. So it's kind of the opposites. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and comment out that code so you can go ahead and play around with that later on. And again, I'm just going to copy this and collapse this code. So the next method is curl. So we have curl right there. And again, exactly the same parameters that I'm passing in right here. And so what is curl? Well, curl is essentially curling this up like a piece of paper, like you would fold a piece of paper, but it's not such a sharp fold. It's more of a nice subtle edge. Now, just to note, this effect does look a lot better when you have a lot more panels involved. So whether it be vertical panels or horizontal panels that you're working with, add more panels if this effect doesn't look right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just hit refresh, and I'm just going to take a look at this now. So you'll be able to see that when I fold this, you'll be able to notice that we get these sort of sharp, jagged edges, and that's because we haven't got enough vertical panels, because don't forget we're animating this horizontally or folding it up horizontally. So I'm going to set this to something like 20, and then I'm just going to go ahead and hit refresh. Now this will create more load on the browser, so don't add too many panels, especially when it comes to mobile devices. But now you'll be able to see this is a lot smoother and a lot cleaner. The only problem with this effect is that when you add too many panels, or when you actually curl it too much, you'll be able to see there are faint white lines right there where you can see sort of in between the panel. So that's not great, but however, it's still a great effect and you can play around with it. And again, you can set your anchored panel. The reset method still works with it, so that will just set it back to its original state. And we can go ahead and say top like so, and hit refresh. And again, we might need to add more panels because again, we've got these sharp edges right here. But overall, it's a really, really cool effect. So now that I've gone ahead and done that, I'm just going to again comment this out to take a look at the next method that I want to show you. So I'm just going to copy that. Alright, so here what we have is the stairs method. So stairs is basically like the stacking effect that we saw right here. And again, you have the same amount of parameters right here that you can pass in. So you have how much do you want to fold it up by. I'm saying none, 0, and I'm setting the anchored panel. And again, the anchored panel in this case with the stairs stays flat to the page. That one doesn't animate. In this case, the right panel is anchored. So once I've gone ahead and done that, what I'm going to do is change this method down here to stairs and go ahead and save that. So what I want to do is go back, hit refresh, and there we go. You'll be able to see now it's folding up like a stack of stairs. Really, really cool. So that is again another method that we have right here. So now I want to show you the next method, which allows you to sort of fold up a div element. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is again comment out this code. I'm just going to copy this and then end the comment right there and paste this below. So for this next method, we don't actually have to define this right here. What we're going to do is say as soon as we mouse over this DOM element right here, we're going to trigger off this function, and what it's going to do is it's going to apply the method of fold up, and we are using camel casing right here, which means that up has a capital U and we don't pass in any parameters right here. Also, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to say, instead of reset, we're going to say unfold. So when we hover over it, it's going to fold up, and then when we move our mouse off the DOM element, it's going to unfold. So go back, hit refresh, and then when we hover over it, you'll be able to see now it is slowly folding up. Now this effect is going to take a while, and it can be a little bit buggy from time to time. So as you can see, as soon as I move my mouse off this, it wanted to sort of unfold, and it's a bit unsure right here as to what to do. So this is a little bit buggy. And obviously a little bit of work needs to be done to the actual source code of this library to actually get this to run properly. But however, what I can go ahead and do is I can change the amount of vertical panels, because it is animating on the horizontal axis, and you can't change that. It will always animate over to the left right here. So what I need to do is actually change the amount of panels so the effect is greater. So if I say 4 panels now, it's going to fold those 4 panels one behind each other, like so. As I said, it's a little bit buggy right there, but if I was to just have my mouse over it, like so, then it would fold. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of a bug there. It should stop and then go back onto the other one. So you're better off with something like a click event rather than a mouse over event. But also speed helps. So if I was to lower this down to something like 200 milliseconds and hit refresh, you'll be able to see it's nice and fast. Alright, so that is the final method that I was going to show you. There are a few other options that you can take a look at and a few other methods that are available to you. But however, you get the general gist of how to use this library. You can definitely read up on the documentation, see how it's all put together, and if there are any JavaScript developers that really know this stuff, maybe you can contribute to the source and help out with this library. It's a really great library. I've enjoyed using it. Very effective and very easy to use. Now, very quickly, we added this right here, which was accordion options.accordion 0b and so forth and so on. Now, we don't need to actually add that in twice, because when we hover over, we're actually going to say, okay, we want this to fold up by such and such a percentage. And we're calling that method right there, so that just doesn't need to be in there. But I'll leave it in anyway for tutorial purposes. But if you were to get rid of it, then in this example you'd need to make sure that you set that parameter also on this accordion method down here. So we set this to B, and then also what you can do is define a callback. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is very quickly just uncomment this out, and I need to make sure this is commented so that it doesn't conflict, just like so. And then what I want to do is put another comma right here to put in another parameter, and we need to use our parentheses right here, which is going to be our object literal, and then I can say when it's completed I want to call back a function. So I'm just going to say call back and then comma, and then I'm going to say function, and then we can create a function that's going to make an alert dialog box. So for example, I can say alert completed. Alright, so if we go ahead and take a look at this inside of the browser, hit refresh, once it's completed you'll get a JavaScript alert dialog box, but you will get quite a few right there. Alright, so now we've actually taken a look at that. That is Oridomi, and don't forget to repeat the process with all of those other little snippets of code. So for example, take that line out right there. And then of course, don't forget to define all of your options on the methods that are available to you so that you get the effect and look you want. So Oridomi is a fantastic library. It needs a bit of spin and polish, but overall it is an incredibly powerful library that lets you create some amazing effects that can really enhance the user experience. So thanks for watching this lesson, and in the next lesson we're going to take a look at actually creating a multi-page form on a 3D cube, which is definitely going to add to the multi-page form experience that most users have to put up with. So thanks for watching this lesson, and I hope you can join me in the next one.